Problem number 1 says, do the data in this table represent a function? If you switch the input and output values, do the data represent a function? Explain. Now, this is actually 2 different questions. So I'm going to highlight the first one, and it says, does the table represent a function? Okay, that is the first question, and I'm going to put a number 1 on top of it so we know what we need to answer. And then the next part says, if you switch the input and output value, does it represent a function? So that will be your second question. So to answer the first question, the only thing you need to pay attention to is check the input values. Okay, so 2 goes to 5, 3 goes to 6, 4 goes to 6, 5 goes to 9, and 8 goes to 11. In this case, you only get 1 output for every input. So this input has only 1 unique output. That's what we're looking for. Our input values don't repeat, so we say this represents a function because the input values don't repeat. To answer the next one, what we're going to do is we actually need to change the table so we know exactly how it works. But instead of creating a new table, I'm going to create a diagram. And I want to put the values. So we have 5, 6, 6, 9, 11. Now, I have 2 6s, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually only going to write one of them. And these are going to be, in this case, your x's, your inputs. And then I'm going to do the next oval. And I want to put 2, 3, 4, 5, 8. I want to draw a line connecting them. So 5 goes to 2, 6 goes to 3, but 6 also goes to 4. 9 goes to 5, and 11 goes to 8. Since we have 6 that goes to 3 and 4, we know that that's not a function. So we put not a function. Because six has 2 outputs. The next part says, Miss Avella class volunteers at an animal shelter 1 day per week. So that's something that we care about. 1 day per week. Each student is responsible for caring for 4 animals every hour. And then he says, part A, complete the diagram to show how many animals are cared for by 1 student over various length of time. Okay, so 1 student, and they're asking for how many animals. So if in the first hour they do 4, so 1 times 4 gives you 4, and then after 2 hours is going to be 2 times 4, so it's going to be a total of 8 animals, and then 3 times 4, and that's going to give you 12 animals. 4 times 4, 16, and 5 times 4 will give you 20. That's how we complete the diagram. Part B says, does the diagram represent a function? Explain why or why not. You need to be very careful. It's asking you for an explanation. Whenever you have to explain, that's an extra point. In this case, it represents a function. And the explanation is every input has only one output. And in this case, you could even say that it's a linear function because it has a constant rate of change. Compare these two functions. So we have function A and we have function B. Comparing means that you're going to be talking about how they are similar or how they are different. So you actually need to explain that part. Part A says, which function shows a greater rate of change? Explain your reasoning. So the first thing you need to do is find the rate of change. So for function A, so I'm going to write it in two different colors. Function A will be red. What we're going to do is we need to choose 2 points. 2 points. So my first point is usually the intersect. So that's going to be my first point. We're going to say 0, 16. Now my next point can be anything I want. I am going to come to 4. 4 for the x, and that's going to be 20 on the y. So my next point is going to be 4, 20. And now we need to use the slope formula. So to do that, we're going to label x1, y1, x2, y2. We're going to draw the boxes. And label them y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. And the only thing I'm going to be doing is paying attention to our numbers and just moving them. So we have y2 is our first one right here. So we're going to write 20. And our y1 is going to be 16. So I'm going to write 16. x2 is 4. And x1 is 0. 20 minus 16 is 4. 4 minus 0 is 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So for function A, we know that the slope is 1. Our unit rate is 1. Our rate of change is 1. Now, let's deal with function B. For function B, we are going to choose 2 points. So I'm going to choose this point, and I'm going to choose this point. Okay, this is going to be my first point and my second point. I'm going to rewrite them as 0, 10 and 2, 14. You can actually choose any point you want. It won't change the answer. So we have x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm going to draw the boxes. we have y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. One more time, I'm only going to graph the numbers. Y2 is 14, y1 is 10, x2 is 2, and x1 is 0. So we got 14 minus 10, that gives you 4. 2 minus 0 gives you 2. 4 divided by 2 gives you 2. The slope of A is 1. The slope of B is 2. The question for part A says, which function shows a greater rate of change? So we will write function B has a greater rate of change because 2 is twice than 1. Part B says, plot the order pairs from the table in function B onto the graph in function A and compare the two lines. Explain how your graph confirms your answer to part A. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the table, this table, and we're going to graph it on the coordinate plane. So our first point is going to be 0 and 10. So 0 and 10, I go to 0, and then I go to 10. That should be somewhere here. I want to use the blue so you can see. Then the next point is going to be 2, 14. So we go to x2 and we go to 14. So I made that correction. So the first one is 0, 10. The next one is 2, 14. Then the next one is going to be 4, 18. The next one is 6 and 22. Then the next one is going to be 8 and 26. So now we're going to connect the points. Now, let's go to part B. We plot the points already. So we're done with that part. And then they're telling you to compare, okay? To compare the two lines and see how they relate to our question. So you can say function B is steeper. In lesson 8 and lesson 9, we spoke how slope is talking about the steepness of a line. The larger the slope, the more steep it is. So in this case, function B is steeper. So we're going to put therefore, and instead of writing the word, we're going to use this sign that actually represents therefore. So function B is steeper, therefore it has a larger slope. Part C says, which function has a greater initial value Use the graph from part B to explain. So we go back to the graph. You pay attention to, this is the initial value for function A. This is the initial value for function B. You say 16 is larger than 10. So that will be our answer. The initial value of function B, function A, my apologies, is 16, while the initial value of B is 10. Number 4 says, tell whether each of the following statements about the diagram is true or false. A says the diagram does not represent a function because two input values map into the same output. So we have two inputs go into the same output. So we have input number 1 and 3 actually go to 5. Remember, when we're talking about the inputs, we only care that the input only has one output. In this case, 1 goes to 5, 3 goes to 5. It's like a vending machine. You can press two different buttons to get the same item. That's totally fine. That makes this true. So the diagram represents, so this doesn't represent a function. That's false. It does represent a function. The next one says the diagram represents a function because each input value maps into just one output. That's true. And the last part says if the input and output values were switched, the diagram would represent a function. Before you guess, actually draw it. If we switch the values, -3, 0, and 5, -2, 0, 1, and 3. 3 goes to 0, 0 goes to -2, 5 goes to 1, and 5 goes to 3. That is not correct because 5 shouldn't be going to two different outputs. So in this case, that's false. The table shows the number of students allowed in a class for given number of teachers. It says plot the ordered pairs from the table on the coordinate grid. Be sure to label and number the axis. Now, that is the main part. Label and number. We know that our inputs are going to be our x values, so I'm going to write x. And these are going to be your y values, the students. So in the bottom, you're going to put teachers. And vertically, you'll put students. Now, one teacher gives you 30 students, okay? Two teachers is 60. 3 teachers is 90, and so on. Okay, and then part B says, does the graph represent a function? If you were to draw a line, it's a straight line. So yes, it would represent a function. So problem 6, Jeffrey wants to hire a catering company. Total cost includes a catering fee, which is going to be your initial value. So we need to highlight that part. Catering fee is your initial value, plus a charge for attendee at the event, which is going to be your rate of change. The total cost for 3 catering companies are summarized. So you actually have one that gives you an equation, one that gives you a word problem, and one that gives you a graph. So what you need to do is identify the slope and identify the y-intercept for all of them. So first, you're going to write the M and the B for all of them. Now, for the first one, it's telling you that the catering fee is 50. We know catering fee is actually your initial cost, and then it says 45 per attendee. So for every single person that you have to bring in, you're going to be paying $45 more and more and more. For Ben Bistro, the one next to the variable will be your slope. In this case, we have $75 for every attendee. So the slope is 75. Since there's no other number by itself, we know that there's no initial cost. And in the next one, to find the slope, what we're going to do is we're going to do a rise over run. So we're going to go 200 up from 400 to 600. That's 200. And we're going to move 10 to the right. So that's going to be 200 divided by 10. That gives you 20. And your y-intercept is right here. So your initial value is 400. So you're going to be paying 400 just to begin. And then you're going to be adding per attendee. Now, part A says, which company has the greatest catering fee? The only thing you need to do is compare. This is 400, this is 50, this is 0. For this problem, we know that Carla's cooking is 400, so that's the most expensive one. The next one, it says, which company has the greatest rate of change? In this case, we have, right, the next one says, which company has a greater rate of change? So we have 45, 75, and 20. Easy to tell which one is the larger number. Ben. And now the next one says, which company should Jeffrey hire if he wants to pay the lowest total cost for an event with 30? For that, you actually need to write the equation for all of them. So the first one is going to be y equals 45x plus 50. And then you're going to plug in 30. For the next one, you're going to do y equals 75 times 30. And for the last one, you're going to do y equals 20 times 30 plus 400. When you solve the 3 equations, you get 1,400, 2,250, and 1,000. So the best way to actually go is with Carla's cooking, even though that she has a greater initial value.